The gravel crunched under my tires as I turned onto the familiar mountain road, my heart already lighter than it had been in months. 3 years. 3 long years since I'd seen my cabin, the place my grandfather built with his own hands in 1972, the sanctuary I'd inherited when he passed. I could still hear his voice from that last summer we spent together. Just months before, the cancer took him. Jake, this land. It's not just wood and dirt, it's our legacy. Your grandmother and I carved out a life here. Promise me you'll protect it, no matter what. I'd held his weathered hand and promised, a promise I was about to discover I'd nearly broken. Work had consumed my life, pulling me to Seattle, then Boston, then Dubai, but now, finally, I was coming home. The late afternoon sun filtered through the towering pines, casting golden shadows across the windshield. I could already smell the mountain air in my mind, taste the cool water from the spring behind the property, the same spring where grandpa taught me to fish when I was 7. Then I saw it. My foot slammed on the brake so hard my seat belt locked against my chest. What the hell? A massive metal gate blocked my driveway. Not just any gate, a professional grade barrier with an electronic keypad, topped with decorative iron scrollwork that screamed expensive. But that wasn't the worst part. Attached to the gate and to the trees lining either side of my property were bright yellow signs. No trespassing. Private property of Pinecrest HOA. Violators will be prosecuted. My property. My family's land for over 50 years. The same land where my grandfather had planted those oak trees the year I was born. I sat there, engine idling, staring at those signs until my shock crystallized into white hot fury. I grabbed my phone and pulled up my property documents. I'd scanned everything before leaving Dubai. The boundaries were crystal clear. This was my land, every inch of it. I parked on the side of the road and approached the gate on foot. There was a small placard next to the keypad with a phone number and the words Pinecrest HOA Management. Contact Carol Hendricks, President. Carol Hendricks? I didn't recognize the name, but I was about to become very familiar with it. I dialed the number. My jaw clenched so tight it ached. Pinecrest HOA, this is Carol speaking. The voice was saccharine sweet, with an undertone of authority that made my skin crawl. Hi, Carol. My name is Jake Morrison. I own the cabin at 447 Ridgeview Trail, and there's a gate blocking my driveway with signs claiming my property belongs to your HOA. There was a pause. When she spoke again, the sweetness had evaporated. Mr. Morrison, that property has been abandoned for 3 years. According to our bylaws, any property left unattended for more than 18 months without paying HOA dues becomes HOA property for community use. Actually, we're in final negotiations with a developer who's very interested in the land. My blood ran cold. A developer? You're trying to sell my property? It's not your property anymore, Mr. Morrison. Mountain Vista Developments has offered us 380,000 for the parcel. The sale closes in 2 weeks. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. My grandfather's cabin, the place where he'd proposed to my grandmother under these oak trees, where he taught me to build a fire, to read the stars, to be a man, they were going to bulldoze it and put up condos. You can't do this, I whispered, my voice shaking. It's already done. But if you'd like to submit a counter offer for the property, we're always open to competitive bidding. She actually laughed. Though I doubt you can match their price. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. My hands were trembling as I called my attorney, David Chen, who'd handled my grandfather's estate. 20 minutes later, after sending him photos and my property documents, he called back. Jake, this is insane. You're not part of any HOA. Your deed predates their charter by 40 years. They have zero legal right to do this. And selling property that don't own, that's fraud. Serious fraud. They said the sale closes in 2 weeks, David. 2 weeks. I'm filing an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow morning. We'll stop this sale, I promise you." That night I broke into my own property. I climbed over a section of fence that erected and made my way through the darkness to the cabin. My hands shook as I unlocked the door. Thank God they hadn't changed the locks yet. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. Grandpa's fishing rod still mounted above the fireplace, the quilt my grandmother had sewn draped over the couch. The photo on the mantel of the three of us, taken the summer before she passed when I was 12. I sank into Grandpa's old chair and broke down. What had I done? I'd abandoned this place, broken my promise, and now vultures were picking at the bones of my family's legacy. The next morning, David filed the emergency injunction and a lawsuit. The judge granted a temporary restraining order, halting the sale for 30 days pending a hearing. Carol was furious. She showed up at the gate with two other women, all wearing matching Pinecrest HOA polo shirts, and a man in an expensive suit, presumably from Mountain Vista Developments. "Mr. Morrison," Carol's face was scarlet, "you have no right to interfere with the legitimate business transaction." The developer stepped forward, looking annoyed. "Look, buddy, we put down a $50,000 deposit. We've got architectural plans drawn up. You're costing us money every day you delay this." "Good, because you're not getting this land, ever." "We'll see what the judge says," Carol hissed. "You abandoned this property. The law is on our side." But as David dug deeper, we discovered something that made my blood boil even hotter. Carol's husband owned Mountain Vista Developments. This wasn't just theft, it was a scam. She'd been using her position as HOA president to identify abandoned properties, claim them through fake HOA bylaws, then sell them to her own husband's company at below market prices. They'd already done it to three other families in the area. The courtroom hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. Those were the longest 3 weeks of my life. Finally, the day came. The county courthouse was packed. Carol had rallied the entire HOA, painting me as a greedy outsider trying to destroy their community. People I'd never met glared at me like I was a criminal. Judge Patricia Hartwell entered, and everyone stood. She was in her 60s, with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Be seated. We're here regarding Morrison versus Pinecrest HOA. Mr. Chen, you may present your opening argument." David stood, and for the next 20 minutes he methodically destroyed Carol's case. He presented my grandfather's original deed from 1972. He showed that the HOA wasn't even formed until 2015, 43 years after my family owned the land. He proved I'd never signed any HOA agreement, never received any notices because they deliberately sent them to the cabin address knowing no one was there, instead of to my registered mailing address on file with the county. Then he dropped the bomb. "Your Honor, we've also discovered that the defendant, Carol Hendricks, is married to James Hendricks, CEO of Mountain Vista Developments. The company purchasing this abandoned property, we have evidence of three similar transactions in the past 2 years, all following the same pattern." The courtroom erupted in gasps and whispers. Judge Hartwell banged her gavel. Carol's attorney, a nervous-looking man who was clearly in over his head, stammered through a weak defense about community improvement and abandoned properties statutes. Then it was Carol's turn to testify. "Mrs. Hendricks," David began, his tone deadly calm, "how did you determine that Mr. Morrison's property was abandoned? He hadn't been there in 3 years. No one maintained it. Did you attempt to contact Mr. Morrison at his registered mailing address, the one on file with the county clerk?" We send notices to the property address." "That's not what I asked. Did you send anything to his registered mailing address, yes or no?" Carol's face flushed. "No, but—" "And when you sent notices to the property address, knowing no one was there to receive them, what was your intention?" "I We were following proper procedure. Were you? Or were you deliberately ensuring Mr. Morrison wouldn't respond so you could claim this land and sell it to your husband's company?" "Objection!" Carol's attorney jumped up. "Speculation. Withdrawn. Mrs. Hendricks, how much profit would you and your husband have made from this sale?" "I don't see how that's relevant." Your Honor, may I remind the witness she's under oath? Judge Hartwell leaned forward. Answer the question, Mrs. Hendricks. Carol's voice was barely a whisper. Approximately $180,000? The courtroom exploded again. David then presented records of the other properties, each one showing the same pattern. Elderly owners who'd passed away, out of state heirs who didn't know about the land, properties claimed by the HOA and sold to Mountain Vista at below market price. When it was my turn to testify, I brought the photo from the cabin mantel. My hands shook as I held it up. Your Honor, this is my grandfather, Thomas Morrison. He built that cabin with his own hands in 1972. He and my grandmother raised my father there. When she died, he stayed because he said he could still feel her there. Before he passed, he made me promise to protect this land, to keep it in the family. My voice cracked. I broke that promise by staying away too long. But I'm here now, and I'm asking you to help me keep it. This isn't just property, it's my family's legacy. Judge Hartwell's expression softened for just a moment. The trial took 2 days. On the afternoon of the second day, Judge Hartwell delivered her ruling. I reviewed all evidence presented, and I find the defendant's action to be not only legally baseless, but potentially criminal. Mr. Morrison's deed is clear and predates the HOA charter. No valid mechanism exists for the HOA to claim this property. She looked directly at Carol, her gaze withering. Furthermore, the pattern of behavior demonstrated by Mrs. Hendricks suggests a deliberate scheme to defraud property owners. I am ordering the immediate removal of all structures and signage from Mr. Morrison's property. The HOA will pay all legal fees and damages. Additionally, I am referring this case to the district attorney for possible criminal prosecution. Carol went white. The sale to Mountain Vista Developments is voided. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff on all counts. The gravel came down, and I felt 50 pounds lift off my chest. Outside the courthouse, the developer confronted me one last time. You just cost us $500,000 in planning and deposits. Sue your business partner, I said, nodding towards Carol. She's the one who tried to sell you stolen property. 2 months later, I stood on my property watching a crew dismantle the gate. Carol was nowhere to be seen. She'd been arrested the week before on fraud charges. Turned out she and her husband had scammed over $2 million from various schemes. 3 other families whose land had been stolen came forward. We formed a support group, helping each other reclaim what was rightfully ours. As the last piece of the gate was loaded onto a truck, I walked up my driveway for the first time as the rightful, undisputed owner. The cabin needed work, but it was still standing. I sat on the porch steps my grandfather had built and looked out at the mountains. I kept my promise, Grandma, I whispered. Took me a while, but I kept it. My phone buzzed, a text from David. By the way, the DA says Carol and her husband are looking at 5 to 10 years. You didn't just save your land, you stopped them from doing this to anyone else. I smiled, feeling my grandfather's presence in the wind through the pines. Sometimes the fight isn't just about what you're protecting. It's about standing up to bullies who think they can take whatever they want. And sometimes keeping a promise means fighting like hell, even when the whole world is against you. The land was safe, the legacy was secure, and I was finally home.